to the cloud. There we go. Okay. All right. We're going to get started. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Welcome to the contracting workshop. There's a lot of dense information in this workshop. We're going to try to make it fun, see how it goes, and try to make it digestible for you all. So we're going to start with some introductions. I'm Jade Bearston. I'm the Director of Heritage Outreach here at the Washington State Historical Society. So our department is the sort of mission of our department is to support heritage and history organizations across the state. We do lots of trainings, workshops, things like that. And then we also manage two grant programs, one of which is Heritage Capital Projects. And then I also have David on the line, if you want to just unmute real quick and wave and say hello.
Hi, David Zinjak. I'm the Capital Projects Coordinator for the Historical Society. I do mostly reimbursements for the Heritage Capital grants now, and manage all of our on-site construction at the museum and the research center.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So I'm the sort of main point of contact, and I'll be working with you over the next couple of weeks for the contracting process. And then once you start working on reimbursements, David will be kind of the first point of contact for all that paperwork. And then we both we tag team on lots of questions and issues throughout the cycle of your grant, and both do site visits as well. So you'll be working with both of us. And then I also have on this slide, and I'll send out the slides as well, have a link to some grant information, a page on our website that has just like various forms and different things for your grant cycle, and then a link to the portal, the Heritage portal, which you've all been in at least a little bit. That's how you submitted your application, and this is a short link you can use to get there. So today we'll do a little bit more introduction about and information about the timeline. We're going to do a walkthrough of the contract document. We're not going to walk through every single section. We're going to kind of highlight a few pieces that we want to highlight that affect our processes, essentially. And then we'll take a 5-minute breather, and then we'll dive into all the reporting that is required. And there's 3 different types of reports that we have, and then we'll have a good long question session at the end. I scheduled the report, the workshop to go till 11:30. I'm hoping we can end at least the main content then, and then I can stick around for questions. We can answer questions after that till about noon if we need to. So a quick reminder that the purpose of the Heritage Capital Projects grant is to support the capital needs and facilities of organizations that preserve and interpret Washington's history. And so providing public access to history is the purpose of the program, and that is reflected in each of your grant contracts. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So here is our timeline for your grant cycle. You're in the 2025 to 2027 state budget biennium. Sometimes you'll see that notated in our documents as B27. We use the end year in some of our notations. So right now, you all in your email got a request to fill out the pre-contract questionnaire, and that will help us with contract negotiations. The budget cycle doesn't start until July 1st of this year, so it's about a little less than a month away from now, and that's the first date that we can sign a contract with you for any of you who have really urgent projects that where you really need to spend grant funds like starting now. So if that's the case for you, fill out that questionnaire, and we can get that contract drafted sooner rather than later. We'll have status reports due monthly, and then for reimbursement requests, there's not a specific schedule, but we do payments out of our fiscal office twice a month. So there is sort of a schedule once you've initiated something that payments can be made. And then June 30th is the last day of the biennium. So that is when the project work must be finished. And then you have a couple of weeks after that to submit any final reimbursement paperwork. So just want to highlight again, you cannot begin any grant-funded work, anything that the grant dollars will be paying for until you have that signed contract in place. So, anything that is happening now or has happened in the past can be matched, but anything you need paid for by grant dollars, you have to have the contract signed first. So I mentioned the pre-contract questionnaire in my emails to you and then just a moment ago. And basically what this is to help us understand what changes have happened since you submitted your application about a year ago. That's a long time between the application and now. So have any people on your project changed? Does the scope of work need adjusting? Does the budget need adjusting? Has some of your income changed? Like maybe you didn't get the grant you thought you would, but you got a different grant to support your match. And then that urgency question at the end of like, how urgently do you need your contract signed? Are you planning to start work on July 2nd? Or is it not so urgent? You're planning to start some grant funded work in the fall, and we got a couple months grace period there. So generally speaking, we can accommodate minor changes to the scope and the budget and all those things. They just can't be changes that change the purpose of the grant. So essentially, it needs to have be the same sort of overall project, but some of the details can be flexible based on project needs, right? Capital projects are complex. We know things come up and changes need to happen. So that just needs to be communicated and put into the contract. Okay, so how does the contract negotiation work? After you've got your pre-contract questionnaire filled out, we've reviewed it. Any changes look pretty good to us. So first, we will take all that information and we will put it into the contract form, which I sent you a sort of sample copy of was that yesterday, 2 days ago? And we will basically take the first try at putting that into the format. The biggest piece is the scope of work. That's the sort of most descriptive piece that is complex. And we, a couple of cycles ago, formatted the application to be how we wanted the scope to look in the contract. So hopefully that's a little less work getting it into those elements of work that you put in your application. So we'll start with the first draft and then we'll send it off to you via Word document and email. And then you're welcome to suggest edits. I really appreciate using Word track changes so I can see exactly what you've edited. The contract form itself cannot change, but the descriptions of your project can change. So you're welcome to, say, I would really prefer it be worded this way, or we need to kind of change this here and there, and send it back to us. And then we review. And if things look good, we'll accept the changes and we'll send it back to you. And it kind of is this back and forth of you suggest edits, we suggest edits, or accept or reject edits. And it's this negotiation back and forth via this Word document. And then once we both have a document that looks good to us, I will send it via electronic signature to your authorized signatory and our director here at the State Historical Society. So we previously have used DocuSign. We are in a brave new world of using Adobe Sign. We've switched accounts, so bear with us as we learn that new technology, but it will still be digital. It will just be, it's very similar. It'll just kind of come from a different email address. So, all right, here's where the fun stuff comes in. I've created some quiz polls just to kind of help with keeping folks engaged. So let's see. I'm going to put it up on the screen. When can you submit a reimbursement request and start receiving grant dollars? Select right now since the budget is signed, starting July 1st, first day of the biennium, the day my contract is signed, or after I've submitted at least 2 status reports. Give it another few seconds. Okay, looking good, looking good. So it was a little bit of a trick question. Um, July 1st is the first day that your contract can be signed. But your contract does have to be signed first. So the correct answer is the day your contract is signed is the day that you can start submitting reimbursement requests. So thanks for playing along. We've got a few more pop quizzes here and there. So we'll move right along. Okay. Moving into the contract itself, the contract document itself, the purpose of the grant is to, of course, benefit the citizens of Washington State, and we must be good stewards of public resources. And what that means in practical terms is we require a fair bit of paperwork to make sure that the money is being spent as was designated by the legislature and be good stewards of those funds. And of course, support your capital needs. So the contract is in all of these lovely sections. Like as I said, we are going to go over a few specific sections today that affect how we kind of function administratively with you, but you need to read the entire contract, of course, before signing it. So make sure that you've read it, that your governing body is aware of what the terms are, that your signatory is aware of it. So please read it carefully before you go ahead and sign. I see a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to get through this content, and then we'll pause for questions at the break, and maybe David can also be in there in the chat answering as well. So first, we've got the main form, the contract form, which looks like this. And the key point that I wanted to pull out of this is that again, the purpose is highlighted here to provide interpretation, preservation, and lifelong learning to the citizens of Washington. Then I wanted to talk about this section, period of performance. So this section highlights that the period of performance ends on June 30th, 2027, end of the biennium. However, it also stipulates that Section 8, which we'll mention in a moment, remains in force for 13 years past project completion. So the Section 8 is the one that talks about monitoring and keeping the capital improvements, which I'll show you in just a moment. But that effectively means that the contract is in effect for about 15 years. So 2 years of project work plus 13 is through 2040. So again, your governing body needs to be aware of that before the contract is signed. So jumping into that, Section 8, improvements to be held means that the improvements, which are outlined in attachment B, which is your scope, the scope of work, need to remain in place. The state has invested money in those physical capital improvements, and those need to be preserved and held for a minimum of 13 years. And then shall be used for the express purpose here is that project purpose, or attachment C, which we'll go over in a minute, meaning you need to continue to provide that public access to history for those 13 years as well. So basically, the commitment you're making is to take care of the state's investment in your property and continue providing that public benefit through access to history. So a breach of this, and essentially, if you stop maintaining the property and public access to history, the breach would result in repayment of the grant with interest. This is not something we've ever enforced before. We do a lot of work in the upfront to try to make sure that the projects are committed to that 13-year monitoring period. So this isn't something we've gone through before, but it is in the contract, and it is something you need to be aware of. All right. For this monitoring period, talks about the agency maintains the right of entry, grantee will continue to be monitored. We'll talk about that in the reports section, but essentially we have you submit an annual statement saying, yes, we're taking care of the property and we're continuing to provide public access to history. It's annual. You'll get email reminders, but it is something that we will do through the portal. Okay, another thing I wanted to highlight from the contract form is this reappropriation section. Reappropriation is kind of a wonky word for extension. Basically, it means you reappropriate funds from one biennium into the next biennium. So the legislature can choose to do that if any capital project, any grant isn't able to finish in that 2-year period. So it's possible, but it's dependent on a decision of the legislature, so it's not guaranteed. And it's restricted to twice. You can ask for an extension twice, meaning a total of 6 years of project work, pending, of course, legislative approval. So something interesting happened this past session during our Heritage Caucus, which meets each Wednesday morning during session. One of our caucus chairs mentioned that the legislature has been talking a lot more about grants and programs that are not spending out their money. And they were complimentary of our program as being well managed, which we of course loved to hear, but there was a lot of comment about the legislature is unlikely to continue to fund programs that are not spending out their money. And so we heard that as the legislature is perhaps going to be less lenient in the future about reappropriations and extensions. And so I want to emphasize to you that it is really important to finish the project as much as you can in this 2-year period, and spend out that money, because the legislature the budget is in a tricky place and we don't know what the needs are going to be in 2 years. And so it's not guaranteed that you'll get an extension. And to that end, the legislature actually, in this last session, put in new budget rules that enforce this 6-year maximum for the project work, and actually a new one, which we hadn't been abiding by previously, which is if you're not under contract at least by 4 years, then the funds lapse. So there's been lots of conversation. There's some of these new budget rules. They seem to be getting quite serious about wanting the money to be spent and not just kind of be laying dormant. So just want to heads up that that's what we're hearing from the legislature. So it's important to finish your project on time. All right, then the end of the contract is the contract representatives and the signatures. So the contract representative listed in your contract should be the main point of contact, that primary contact. Hopefully all the primary contacts are able to make it today for each grant. This is the person acting officially on behalf of the grantee, the person we're mainly interfacing with. The agency's representatives meet, the program manager, and then the signatures will be from our director, Jennifer Saunders, and then the authorized signature from your organization does need to be an executive officer or otherwise legally authorized person to sign legal agreements on behalf of your organization. Sometimes that has to be like the mayor or city manager. Sometimes it's the board president, executive director. It does have to be someone with enough authority to legally bind your organization. So it can't be, just a volunteer. So it needs to be someone with the authority. Okay, another pop quiz. I have to get back to Zoom window. All right. Now sharing screen and doing. Oh, I got it. Okay. Next pop quiz is, how many years after project completion will the terms of this contract continue to be in place? Got 2 years, end of the biennium, 10 years, 13 years, till my property lease expires or I sell the property, or none. Contract ends when the project is finished. All right. Seeing lots of correct answers. Excellent. Okay. I'm gonna end our poll and move us along just because we got a lot to get through. But the correct answer is 13 years. 13 years past project completion, which I should mention is if your project is extended and reappropriated, that's 13 years past that. So it's not necessarily 15 years from now, it's 13 years past your project completion, whenever that may be, which again, hopefully will be on time so we can show the legislature how great a grant program this is. All right. Oh, another quiz. Oh no. Wait a minute, I hit the wrong one. Yes, all right, here we go. How many reappropriations are you guaranteed? All right, give it another couple seconds. This is another little bit of a trick question as well. All right, share the results. The answer is none. You're not guaranteed any. So you are allowed to request up to two. So 2 and 1 with an option to request a second are kind of correct in that you're allowed to request, but you're not guaranteed. So a little bit of a trick question in the way I worded the question there. So no guarantees. Again, we're going to finish our contracts and projects as soon as we can on time. Okay, moving along. Now we're into attachment A. This is another very long, wordy one. And again, we're going to just be highlighting sections that we want to kind of call your attention to for administrative sort of process purposes, but you need to read all of the sections and be aware of all of the requirements. So contract modifications. This is allowed. We know just as things will change between your application and now for the contracting, things will change in the next year or two as you get into your project and unknown unknowns are discovered. So a contract modification is essentially an amendment to the document that we'll sign up front. But you must let us know ahead of time. You can't just be doing different work that's not in your contract, not in your scope, and not have that be, excuse me, an agreement between us as contract parties. So it needs to be in writing and signed by both parties, as it says there. That means that you let us know what the changes are. We kind of approve them conceptually, and then we write up a contract amendment. We get the language corrected, and essentially often what this is like a scope revision. So in the amendment, it'll say, we both agree to remove attachment B and replace it with this new attachment B. And so we just kind of replace it in whole with a newly worded scope of work. And then you sign it, Jennifer Saunders signs it, and then that work can be modified and changed. There is a clause in here about no more than 10% of the budget categories. So we can allow up to 10% fluctuation between the budget categories. If it's more than that, then we do need to do an amendment to update that budget attachment. We have very few budget categories right now, which was an effort to simplify this process. So hopefully this will happen less. But if you had planned to spend a bunch of funds on design, but then things change and the design ended up getting donated or something, and you want to spend more money on construction, we can swap those numbers around again, as long as the general purpose of that of the project is not changing. Non-assignability. This is some contract speak that basically means that this contract is your responsibility and you can't sort of give it to anybody else. So that means if you're a lessee, if you're leasing the property, long-term lease, you can't just say, whoops, nope, now the owner of the property is in charge of this. We are signing a contract with your organization, and you are required to fulfill the terms of the contract for that 13-year period past project completion. There have been some very special cases where property ownership or contract has been transferred. This is very extenuating circumstances. It approves of approval from the Attorney General's office. It's a rare thing, but we can sometimes accommodate that. So if there's any extenuating circumstances that you're running into, either during the project or during the monitoring later, those 13 years in the future, please just let us know as soon as possible so that we can arrange something that will work for both parties and that you're not in breach of contract. Let us know, and we want to work with you. So basically, I mean, this would only be like if an organization has some type of complete implosion or, some really catastrophic thing. But let us know. Don't keep us in the dark because you've made this commitment to this contract. All right, we're going to move along. Acknowledgement. This is a question that comes up a lot. We do require you to acknowledge the grant that has funded the project, and that's here in the contract. So we've got a variety of things that we require: publicity, mention in publicity materials, a sign that's up during the project, and then a permanent acknowledgement after the project is complete. We do not have a specific format that permanent acknowledgement has to be in, because we recognize that some people have donor walls with, medallions or a different type of sign, and some people just kind of have a special sign for Heritage Capital Project that they put up in their lobby or something like that. Because it varies so much by the property, we don't have a specific format or type. We have some suggested language, and that little kind of pop up down there, that's the text from the guidelines, but we're flexible with that language as well. If it's too long to fit in where you're going to place it, let us know. We just want the program acknowledged physically on site after the project is complete. And then also one last acknowledgement is a letter to legislators communicating the value of the program to your representatives. So this again is just an effort to communicate the value of the grant program. So we'd really love that to be communicated from the folks receiving kind of the most direct benefit, but then of course communicating the larger benefit to the citizens of the state through that public access to history as well. All right, public disclosure. So we are a state agency. We are subject to public disclosure laws. Everything you submit to us becomes a public record, which anyone can request at any time. We can reasonably redact sort of sensitive personal information, and we will notify you if anyone is requesting specific information about or detailed information about your project. We don't send out typically notifications if someone's like, oh, send me a list of the grants that got awarded, or a little bit about like program history. If it's broad information, we don't usually send a notification, but if it's somebody that's asking for a lot of specific information about some specific grants, we'll let you know. In order to stop the release of that, if you were interested, it's actually, you can only stop it with a court order. So just be aware of that. As a public grant, you're subject to public disclosure as well. Right of entry, this again is very sort of a legalese term, but it just means site visits. It's our favorite part of the job. We love to come and visit you. We love to see the properties. We love to see the progress. We try to get out and about around the state, especially in the spring and summer when weather is good. So we love coming and visiting you. Evaluation and monitoring. This happens throughout the project through our status reports, and then again, as I mentioned, after with the monitoring reports, which we will discuss shortly. All right, termination. Doesn't happen too often, but on occasion, a project for whatever reason cannot continue. There's two main ways that termination happens. One could be for cause, which basically means you did something wrong or failed to comply with the contract, and in that case, we can require you to repay the grant funds if there's a breach of contract. But more often than not, it's usually a termination for convenience. Someone, a grantee, just isn't able to get the project off the ground, or some other match that they thought was solid falls through, something like that. And in that case, we allow folks to sort of spend out as much of the grant funds as they can. And then we close out the contract, again, termination for convenience. If you don't spend all of the money, you're still subject to the monitoring. So if for some reason you can't be subject to the monitoring and that's the issue, then you would not be able to have the funds invested. I mean, the monitoring is the benefit that goes to the state. So we'll fairly regularly have folks who spend up most but not all for whatever reason of their grant funds, and then we just kind of close the contract then, and then initiate the monitoring from there. So. All right, more pop quiz. All right, if your project costs change affecting your budget or scope, what do you need to do? What's the process for incorporating changes into your contract? Contract modifications is what they were called in the fancy language, contract language. All right, I think we got most folks. Again, a little bit of a trick question with that all of the above. And it is all of the above. So get sort of a verbal confirmation from us first that you're going in the right direction before you're spending a lot of time writing down changes. We appreciate sort of a brief description of those changes so that we can incorporate that into the signed document. The third one, C, is the most important. that is true, that has to happen. But we do ultimately prefer to have all of the above happen where possible. So yeah, those written changes in an email can just help us with that third one of getting those changes written out into a contract amendment. So great. Okay, I think we have one more quiz here. Okay, forms of acknowledgement. I need to launch. Why is it not letting me launch this one? Oh, because I'm sharing results of this other one. Hold on, stop sharing. There we go, launch. Okay. Which forms of acknowledgement are required for the Heritage Capital Projects program? Select all that apply. Publicity materials, posted sign, notice in a newspaper, permanent sign, and letter to a state senator or representative. Good. Okay, lots of correct answers here. The answer is A, B, E, and E. So yeah, I tripped no one up with my notice in a local newspaper. No one got tripped up there. But yes, all four of these are required. So, and I didn't mention it before, but that permanent sign after project completion actually does have to be at least in process before you can receive your final reimbursement. So we request an image of it. If it's in process, it's not quite done, we could make an exception on a case-by-case basis, but typically we want to see that in place before we give you your last grant check. Whew, okay, moving right along. We're gonna finish out the attachments and then pause for some questions and a break. The scope of work, attachment B. as I mentioned before, this is kind of the bulk of the work as far as drafting your contract is concerned. Hopefully, the way things are organized in your application will make it fairly easy. So we've organized it, as you saw in your application, into elements of work. Well, what is that? Hopefully, this is ringing bells from reading the guidelines when you submitted your application. They're basically practically organized items or phases that correspond to sort of how you're going to like just practically implement the project over time. So a couple things to keep in mind as we're negotiating on what these are. We will probably, for a lot of you, choose to rearrange or regroup various elements that you included in your application into typically bigger buckets, in a format that is detailed enough that everyone's on the same page with what the work is, but not so detailed that that's going to require us to process a bunch of scope amendments in the future. So it's a bit of a fine art getting the right amount of detail in that scope, again, so that it's clear, but we're not having to update it because of minor project changes. And each of these elements that are listed in the scope will be the basis for your status reports. They'll be listed in your report and you'll be asked to report on each one. So that is something else to keep in mind as we're thinking about what your scope's going to look like. That will affect what your reporting will look like also. So as for that specificity issue, for instance, we typically will describe something like adhering to historic standards versus like specifically spelling out every single historic detail of your building. Sometimes we'll get more detailed if there's some really special historical character defining features in your building, or we'll get more specific for a type like that windows need to be preserved or doors need to be preserved, things like that. But another, for instance, is, you know, building systems or HVAC, where we don't want to include the model type and specifics of the system. We just want to kind of describe it broadly enough that it's a system that's going to be installed at your discretion. As far as, you know, we don't care what kind of system it is. If it works for your building and gets the job done, that's what we care about. Okay. The scope of work. This is going to be the bulk of our back and forth over email of sorting it out and making sure the description works for both parties. The project purpose, attachment C. This one probably won't have quite as many edits, but this one is super important because this is the benefit you're providing to the citizens of Washington. So we distill this from what you've described in your application. And then, but basically it just needs to describe the work you're doing every day. For a lot of you, that's operating a museum for the public with exhibits, programs, different things. If you're not a museum, how are you providing that public access? Do you do tours of your building? Do you do any special programming around your building that's receiving the funds? If you're primarily, you know, an archive, not so much a museum, how does the public access that? How do you provide that access? Just, we need it described briefly so that that's the thing we're monitoring in the future, that, oh yeah, you're an archive, you allow the public to come in these, you know, during business hours, Monday through Friday, great. We just want to make sure that that continues to happen for the next 13 years. So yeah, this doesn't have to be complicated. It's just, for most of you, like kind of what you already do. Just need to describe it in the contract and make sure we're both on the same page about you continuing to do that for 13 years. And then generally we add something in that attachment talking about field best practices. Essentially means that as you do your history work, as you do your preservation work, you're going to do that to the best of your ability, and you know, you're going to follow historic standards. You're going to good history work, and if you need help with that, our team can help you. If there's any questions you have or issues you're running into, let us know. We want to help you provide that history in the best possible quality for the public, so let us know. All right, project budget. This is pretty straightforward. We're going to pull this right out of your application. It's the same format. if things need updating, now's the time to do that. You can just let us know in that questionnaire if any of these, anything needs to swap between match or grant or construction versus design, et cetera, et cetera. This one's pretty straightforward. You've got to get the numbers to total. One thing that will affect this as we work on contracting is that for anyone who didn't ask for sort of a round number as their grant number, the legislature always rounds up to the nearest $1,000. So for some of you, that means you're getting slightly more grant than you requested, which means you have to provide slightly more match than you anticipated. So we may have to fiddle with some of those numbers just to get them up to those round numbers that the legislature works with, but it's usually pretty minimal, a matter of a few $100s, but it might look a little slightly different than what was in the application. Attachment E is the source of available funds, which basically means your match income. So this is something that you filled out in your application. You are required to be at 75% of your total match in your application. Before you contract, you must be at 100. So if you already provided 100, great. It should note that in your questionnaire. It should say, oh, I see the calculation. You're at 100. Great. If you're not at 100, you need to add the remaining 25% before or whatever the remaining percent was, before we contract with you. So basically what we're trying to confirm through this attachment and through having this in the application is that you have the money, the match you say you do. Again, this goes toward getting those projects actually off the ground and completed in that 2-year time span. That is important. And that no other state funds are going toward this. You cannot match state funds with other state funds. That's just a state rule. So if there's a grant from another state agency, it's fine, you can use it, you just can't use it as match for our grant. We prefer to have the original source. So that means it's not like account balances. Where did that money come from? Was that membership contributions? Was that a grant? Was that earned income from rentals? Like we would prefer to have the source, where that money came from, listed here, just so we can confirm again that source is not another state source. But if it's something that's been earned over many years of membership income or just general donations, many years span, that's okay. We can work with you on that. We just need to kind of basically have enough documentation that you're not just sort of making the number up and that money exists. So we can work with you on that. This is not invoices. This is not like, oh, I spent money on X, so I'll list it here. That's not what this is for. This is where the money is coming from, not how you spent it. Hopefully, a lot of you actually did, I think, go ahead and document 100%. So hopefully, this will be a breeze for most of y'all. Okay. Attachment F is a certification to follow all state laws. Again, as a state grant, you're subject to, I mentioned, public records request. Here are a few more state laws you're subject to. This is not comprehensive, but these are some of the ones that we want to call your attention to. Governor's Executive Order 2102, which is about consulting with Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation and Tribes. Prevailing wage. This is a big issue for some folks. And then high performance public buildings. This is like environmentally sustainable buildings. LEED is the acronym there. We're going to talk a little bit about each of these, not in too much detail, but just want to mention a few things about each of them. So for 2102, during application, you needed to submit to DAP a description of your project and get a determination from them. So if anything about your project majorly changes, you need to report that to them. They are the sort of regulatory body as far as not damaging historical resources. We're not the main audience for this because our grant exists to preserve historic resources in most cases. But it is something that we need to be aware of and keep them posted on. So Again, if your scope changes, like, you're obviously going to be letting us know because we need to work on your contract amendment. But we also need to let DAP know. Usually we're able to give you enough guidance that by the time you get, you're communicating that to DAP, it's not going to be a problem. You just need to let them know. We're doing tribal consultation a little bit differently this round. Previously, we had each applicant contact their local tribes, and we've sort of been trying to change that to reduce the burden on tribes. We as staff are going to send basically a packet out to each tribe that outlines the entire slate of grants. We've been waiting to do that until the budget was signed. So we're going to initiate that here in the next few weeks. And we'll let you know if we hear back from tribes, if they have any problems with any of your grants. Again, for the most part, we're working with his existing buildings, and although sometimes it's new construction, tribes are mostly concerned about ground disturbance and the potential to affect archaeological resources that are unknown. So if your project is potentially going to be affected by that, we'll work with you and the tribes on that. All right, here's the context for DAP. This is in the guidelines. Maddie is the person to contact about built environment stuff. Rob is the person to contact about archaeological issues. Hopefully y'all got your designation from DAP and things are fine. Again, just need to let them know if any changes come up, which again, hopefully won't be too many, but you can never tell. Prevailing wage. So I want to preface this by saying I'm not a labor expert and we are not a regulatory agency, but I want to try to give you enough information that you can adhere to Washington State prevailing wage requirements. So you, as the grantee, need to register in the Department of Labor and Industries portal as the awarding agency. That's very confusing. That is just the term that their portal uses, but you are the awarding agency because you are the person receiving the state funds. And then your contractors and subcontractors need to also register in the system. You create the project, the contractors get connected to that project, and then the contractors are able to submit their reports through the system for your project. That's the kind of how it's supposed to work. There's a variety of forms that LNI has. The intent and affidavit forms, basically, they basically say, we understand we're going to be paying prevailing wages. You've got to post them on the job site. And then afterward, you have to submit the payroll saying we intended to do it, and here we're showing you that we did it. So you as the grantee are responsible for letting your contractors and subcontractors know that this is a requirement of this state money. Couple other things about prevailing wage. There's no minimum dollar. If you have $1 of state money in your project, you are subject to prevailing wage. Once state funds enter the project, you must use prevailing wage moving forward. So the way that the state works is that the dollars entered your project the day that the governor signed the budget on the 20th. So as of May 20th, your project needs to be using a minimum prevailing wage. You don't have to back pay if for some reason you weren't using prevailing wage in the past. You don't have to go back and pay, but starting May 20th, your project needs to be using prevailing wage. As I mentioned a minute ago, we are not a regulatory body. We are not labor experts. This is not in our area of expertise. We just want to try to get you information so that you can comply with this law. So I've listed the email here to contact Labor and Industries, LNI, about questions you have. It often will take them a couple of weeks to respond, but they generally do get back to folks. So if you've got questions, they offer a variety of training. If you want to sign up for a training, you're welcome to do that as well. Performance public buildings. this only applies to buildings of a certain size. So basically, if it's a certain, well, if it's a certain size or a certain cost, then you need to take measures to make your building more environmentally sustainable. This will apply to not too many folks. If it does, we can chat with you about it. If you think that this might apply to you, we can have a specific description about that or discussion about that. But just wanted to call that out. Home stretch, the last two attachments. Attachment G is property information. So basically, earlier in the contract, it says this applies to this property listed in attachment G. This is a description of your project, property and the location. If you have a site that has multiple buildings, we might want to add a site plan, just like a quick sketched out site plan, so we understand sort of what buildings are there and where they are in relation to each other. But this is pretty straightforward. And then attachment H is leases, contracts, and agreements. So this is anything that affects property access, potentially because it can potentially affect public access. So this is, you can see the types of documents down below. I've listed leases, subleases, MOAs, MOUs, liens on the property, anything that could potentially affect how the property is managed or accessed. This is not intended to, make you ineligible or anything. If you're eligible, if you have site control, we just need to know who has interest in this property, because we as the state of Washington are now entering into a contractual agreement regarding the property. So we want that documented here. If you're in a long-term lease, that lease definitely has to be listed here. If you're the property owner, you own it outright, you don't lease any of the property to any of the people. And this could be a blank table. But if there are any agreements that affect property, we need to have them listed. And we may request copies of those contracts and documents depending on what they are, and if we think we might have any concerns about it. Okay. Before we go to questions, let's do one more pop quiz. Oh, this is a repeat. This is the repeat. Okay, let's just move on to questions. Woo, okay. That was a lot. That was our first half. We're gonna have to move quickly in the second half. David, I see lots of chat going on. Have you been able to be answering folks?
Yeah, I think I've been answering all of them. You might want to read through, make sure you don't want to add anything, but they were all pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Tariff situation, potential impact on budget escalations. Is there opportunity for budget increases? There's an opportunity for budget editing, but we will not be increasing grants. We don't have a mechanism for that. Excuse me. The program is capped at 10 million, and we are giving out 10 million. But if you're interested in the program having a higher cap, you can talk to your legislators about that. We are recording and we'll be posting this presentation. Yes. Yep, David is answering these. And correct, Holly, improvements, repairs, all good. If it's something major, then we would probably want to review that, especially if it affects the historic elements of your property over the 13 years. But it's just as easy as like a email, hey, this happened, we're going to do this. Great, thumbs up. Or hey, use this material instead of that material. We'd prefer. Good question. Good question, Holly, about scope. The scope includes everything. Saying this out loud because I'm not sure who all has been reading the chat. The scope includes everything you're doing that is counting as match and everything that you're doing that's being paid for by grants. So it's all included because you're reporting on all of those expenses. So we're going to include them all in the scope. And it's not new, Jeff, sorry. Does our match number need to be a round number, like the grant funds number? Not particularly. It just needs to be double. It just has to be that 2-to-1 match. So there's a minimum number that has to be. If you've got 100,000 in funds, you're going to have to show at least 200,000 in match, but you could show 210,000 or 210,432. It doesn't really matter as long as it's over that 2-to-1 match. And then how specific do we need to be with a source of funds? We do not, we do require identifying each donor for anything over $10,000. For less than that, we can do like a summary report. But anything larger than 10,000, we require sort of a specific, like, yes, so donated this large thing. We've had grantees in the past who have wanted to keep donors anonymous, and that's fine too. Just show us that, again, you have enough documentation that it's real. Okay, let's do 5-minute break, breather, and then we'll jump into reports. So we will return at 11:04. Share my little alert. We'll see you then. Hey, we've got a lot to get through, so I'm gonna just let us roll right into our second portion. We are going to be talking about reporting and reimbursement. So there are three, I mentioned this kind of alluded earlier, there are three types of reports that we use throughout the life cycle of your grant and contract and 13-year monitoring. First is status reports monthly. We'll go over the form. These are not intended to be lengthy. We just want like a quick snapshot update where you are in your work so that we can keep tabs on that. Reimbursement requests are as needed. You know, a lot of times we get projects that kind of go a little dormant in the wintertime because wintertime is not construction time. So we understand that. You're not going to be submitting reimbursement reports all the time. You're going to be submitting them as the work happens. And then monitoring reports will be once a year after the project is completed. You'll receive email notifications in your inbox to remind you or the person listed as the primary contact. Again, designed to be quick updates just to keep tabs on how you're doing. Speaking of email updates, oh, well, this is the system email that the emails will come from. It looks very spammy. Do not reply.grants07 US East 1 at Flux. So make sure that this email is on your safe list or that at flux.io is a safe domain in your email because that's where all your reminders will be coming from. Again, I'll send this out to you, the slides out to you. You don't have to write this down, but that's something to be aware of. And then I have this little pop out here that shows that the center is listed as Washington State Historical Society, but the email address is going to be this do not reply email. So be sure to make sure that that's a safe one. To get to the portal, Flux is the program name that we use. So the URL that we're assigned through that is wshs.flux.io. I have the sort of easier link here, washingtonhistory.org/portal, if that's easier to remember, but you want to just bookmark it. If there's any new folks on your team that don't have portal access, you can use this quick link, the quick registration. It means they don't have to refill in all your organization info because we already have that. But if we just need their info as a user and give them access and approve them, they can do that really, really quickly. Each person on your team should have their own login. So it gets really confusing if multiple people are logging in under one name. Having those separate accounts really helps us see who's working in the system and who we need to be talking to help you along. So everyone just, it's by email. So you have your email, can log in, and then everyone has access to the same information. Everyone can edit the reports. Everyone can get in there and do work. Okay, find the reports. The dashboard is a little clunky, unfortunately. There are plans to redesign this from the Flux people, but it's sounding like it's a ways away. So to get to the reports, you log in. On the left-hand side, there's a gray sort of column menu, and toward the bottom, there's this reports section. This is my test account, so they have a lot of reports too. You will not see this many reports in your account. And then under that section, the starter reimbursement is where you will find a blank reimbursement form to start at any point that you need to. As I said, we don't have a strict schedule for this. It's as the project money is spent and you're wanting to get reimbursed for that spending. Under reports due, that will be new status reports. Your pre-contract questionnaire should be in there. Your monitoring eventually will be in there. If you submit a reimbursement report and then we send it back to you for corrections, it'll show up in the reports due section. But if you're looking for the blank form, it'll be under starter reimbursement for the reimbursement. Everything else is under reports due. Okay, status reports, once a month. Again, not intended to be a lot of labor. If there is a lot going on and there's a lot, and it's gonna take you a long time to type it out, talk to us and let us know if you need to discuss things in more detail. The first section is basically we're asking you to estimate how far along you are, 10%, 80%, 99%, and then what your anticipated completion date is. For a lot of you, that completion date will probably be June 30th, 2027. But if you know it's going to be earlier, let us know so we can plan for wrapping up your grant earlier than that. Any current issues? Describe if there's anything coming up, anything causing delays, anything that you're working through, just a quick note to let us know. And then the next section is that reporting on those elements of work that I mentioned from your application that's being translated into your contract. So the form's a little clunky. We couldn't get it to automatically list each one with its own field. So we have the list via text. And then you click this plus button here to add a description. So this little form will pop up and you enter the name Foundation Restoration and then enter the status of where you're at with that. It could be complete, it could be on hold, it could be we did X, Y, and Z over the last 2 months, and then hit save and it'll show up in the form as a table like this. And then photos. Photos are our favorite. We love seeing progress photos. It's helpful if they are, if it's just a suggested naming convention, you can come up with something that works for you. But if they're dated and like a quick description of what you're showing us photos of, some photos of some friends in Pullman, at the depot there doing work. We love seeing in progress photos. Be sure that you have permission to share these photos. Most of the time it comes from grantees themselves, so that's not a problem, but we will use these photos for publicity for the program. So just keep that in mind that they become public. Excuse me, scratchy throat. We do have the option for status reports to have this little checkbox where no progress has happened in the last month. Again, like I say, in the winter months, often things kind of go on pause during the cold weather. So that's fine. If you're literally just waiting for work to start again and you have nothing to report on, you can click this box and then let us know when you anticipate work to begin again. If you click this too many months in a row, you will get a follow-up from us of, hey, what's going on? You know, maybe the project resume date has come and gone that you put in previous reports. We're going to follow up with you, but this is mostly just to have a quick touch point with you. No work's happening. It's January. You know, no one's working. So it's totally fine. Just if it happens too much, we're definitely going to follow up with you. Okay, that's status reports once a month. Quick little update. Reimbursement reports, a little less quick, but very important. For reimbursement reports, you always need to maintain that 2-to-1 match, which we discussed a minute ago during the questions. You have to list out the expenses individually and provide documentation for each expense. And then the form itself has to be, or the invoice itself the invoice you're sending to the state has to be signed off by the project manager, the person who prepared the report, and an authorized signatory. And that needs to be 2 separate people. So if you're the executive director who's also filling out the reports, you're going to need to have some other authorized person sign in addition to you. Okay. We're going to walk through reimbursement reports and how to do them. First of all, eligible expense rules still apply, or apply even more so now. We're going to be a little bit reviewing these in more detail as those reimbursements come in. This is all new information. This is all not new information. This was part of the application. And this text is straight out of the WAC, the Washington Administrative Code, that we follow based on the program parameters. So there's no difference in eligibility of types of things you can spend your money on from match to grant. It's all the same. It has to be eligible work no matter if it's match or grant. The only restriction is that past expenses have to be matched and donated expenses have to be matched. Donated materials or labor. So I'm not going to take the time to read through all this. This should be old news to you, but it has to be a capital expense. For some applications will list things that are ineligible, like publicity and marketing and fundraising and things like that. We will be removing those out of your scope as we create the scope for your contract. And we'll be flagging those if you try to submit them for reimbursement as ineligible. So speaking of ineligible, these are the ineligible expenses listed in the WAC, W-A-C. Again, won't take the time to read through all of these because this would be review. But I do have a couple of frequently asked questions that I want to address. So first is an aggregation of deferred maintenance considered a capital project? The answer is no, but deferred maintenance can sometimes result in the need for a larger capital project. So there's a bit of gray area there, and it can get a little tricky. But generally speaking, capital needs to be something that is part of a larger overall project. So when you're submitting your reimbursement request, it needs to be related to the larger project, not like replacing a light bulb here and changing a door lock there. It needs to be part of the large project. Question, why can't I submit my permanent exhibit? Because it'll last more than 13 years. Because the language for the grant program expressly says this will not fund any part of any exhibit. So it's not considered a capital expense for the purposes of this program. Can I count my staff's time working on the application, documenting the project, or submitting reports? No. That is considered essentially like you're applying for the grant is fundraising and administrative. But you can, moving to the next question, count staff time working on the actual physical capital project itself. So what that requires, however, is documentation. So it needs to be either tracked with a specific like project code through your payroll software, like you have people logging their time in your payroll software for this specific project for the capital work, or keeping some other type of timesheet. We do not accept percentages of positions, like, oh, so-and-so spent like about 20% of their time last month. We do not accept that. It has to be documented by specific hours and time spent on your staff. We have a volunteer doing great work, really high skilled labor. Shouldn't they be worth more than the standard volunteer rate? Unfortunately, unless they have professional experience in that work, they're not valued higher than the standard volunteer rate, which is $37 an hour this round. So it has gone up again. For professional labor, it requires basically an invoice from a professional person that says, I do this professionally, I would have charged this amount and I'm donating it. What is the rule for including equipment? And the equipment can be included if it is sort of permanently affixed and part of the capital project. So David, do you want to make any comment about the equipment? Will I cough a little bit?
Yeah, sure. As soon as I can unmute. Yeah, I mean that comment says pretty much everything. As long as it's either affixed to the building or it's required for the building to be used for its purpose. So like dust collection is the common example, where a shop isn't useful without the dust collection system, or isn't safe to use without the dust collection system. Essentially, if you have something like that, though, let us know and we can work through it with you. Something that's critical to your project, but may not necessarily be bolted down or considered standard equipment for the building.
Great. And then the last one are consumables and tools required to complete the project eligible. Yes, but it has to have been intended to be consumed in the project. It's not like, oh, I had this piece of equipment or this tool that I, ended up breaking down in the middle of the project, so I'm going to charge it to the grant. You can't do that. It has to be like, oh, we bought a bunch of sandpaper in order to complete the grant project. We anticipated that would be used up. Those are supplies and consumable supplies for the purpose of the capital project. Okay, I'm gonna scoot us along because I'm gonna try to get through the slides by 11:30. I have to schedule this for 2 hours in the future. So there has been confusion between cash and in-kind match from folks ever since I started. Cash match is anything that you paid money for. It doesn't matter where that money came from. It could be a grant. It could be a charitable gift donation. It could be membership. It could be earned income. Anything that you put money down to purchase supplies, pay someone for their labor, that is considered cash. Even if that was a donation from a person who donated money to pay for that labor, you're paying for the labor. So that's cash. That's cash match. You took cash from someone as a charitable donation and paid someone. That's cash. The only thing that's in kind is where no money is exchanged. So someone gives you materials, someone gives you their time, and you're not paying them. In kind is only where no funds are exchanged. Okay, reimbursement requests. These are the elements of a reimbursement request. There's the form in the portal. There's the supporting doc list is the term we use. It's a spreadsheet that you fill out that lists each expense. Oops. The packet where all of your expense documentation lives. And then if you're including volunteer hours, we have a report form for that, and then the timesheets as well. The reimbursement request form in the portal looks like this. First, you're marking whether or not it's your final report. You're filling in the earliest and the latest dates that you're including for your expenses. You'll be filling in the numbers here after you fill everything in your spreadsheet, and we'll come back to this. And then you work with your attachments. Most of the information is in the critical information is in the attachments. So, oh, and then we have these sections of the form down lower that will, in fact, this is a little bit outdated. I reformatted a bit, but that show you all the reports in the system related to your grants. If you scroll down a little further, you can see some of these running tallies. So, starting with the doc list, this is the main document that you're submitting with the main information on it. The first tab has instructions. They're pretty detailed and hopefully pretty helpful. So if you've got a question or you're struggling with something, definitely check that out. But the basic format of it is that you list the date of your expense, what it went toward, what element in the scope, or what was the thing you were spending money on, who you paid, vendor. So did you buy something from a store? Did you pay a person to do labor? I think we actually have deleted the payment type column. But then the category is your cost category. That's your, is it design or is it construction, basically? And then, tricky part, is listing in the columns where that money is going to go. Here's the sample. What's probably easiest is listing 2 parts grant, or excuse me, 2 parts match and 1 part grant for each line. You can see that for these first 2 expenses, $15,000 expenses, 10,000 of it is match, 5,000 of it is grant. That's probably the easiest. But not everyone can do this because there's some things that are restricted, like volunteer labor has to be in kind, past expenses has to be in kind. So if you have sort of a project that has more in kind or restricted expenses that have to be in a certain category, then you're going to have to kind of fiddle with the numbers to make sure the 2-to-1 match is always working. Often we'll ask folks to submit all past match up front, so we can get that documentation out of the way. So in that case, you might be submitting a spreadsheet like this that has no HCP dollars. It just has all past cash match. And then in the future, you'll submit one with only HCP. So it really depends on how your project is structured. We can help you with this. We know it gets confusing. But generally speaking, the thing to remember is we have to maintain that 2-to-1 match throughout the cycle of your project.
Minimum, right? You can go way ahead of it. You just can't
Correct.
get it. Yeah.
Exactly. And we've got a calculation added to the form to include your administrative match as well. So we'll work with you all to make sure that you're meeting the thresholds. But basically, you gotta show your cash match or your match first before you get the grant funds. Okay, so once you've got this all filled out and the numbers are all in the right columns, then in the 3rd tab, you see this. And this is just sorting everything out by cost category, cash, in kind, HCP. And these are the numbers, A, B, C, D, E, F, etc., that you put back into the form here. And this allows the numbers to total over time as you're submitting multiple reports. So very important to fill out the spreadsheet and then put the numbers back into the form. Okay, so that's the spreadsheet. The next big piece of work is the expense documentation packet. This is what we spend a lot of time reviewing after you submit. We're reviewing it to make sure the expenses are eligible, as the slides I was mentioning earlier. It's within the scope, and that you're not going rogue and doing stuff we didn't agree to in the contract. Necessary and reasonable, that you're not, charging $50,000 for someone for 1 day of, carpentry work or something like that. That there's not any red flags that some of these expenses aren't making sense. We want to make sure they haven't been counted for any other grant or state award, which you're not submitting that information to us, but that's why we're always asking about other grants. Sometimes if we know you have a different state grant or have had one in the past, we'll ask for copies of things that you submitted to other state grants, so that we can make sure that you're not double submitting, double dipping, as it were, because that's not allowed. Once you match or use something for a state grant, then it's kind of out of play. And that the dates that the expenses were incurred at the appropriate time. So for match, that can be past expenses. You can go back to July of 2019. But again, for grant expenses, that day your contract is signed, that's the earliest date that can be for grant expenses. So in the packet, you're going to provide documentation for both what was paid for, meaning what'd you spend the money on? Did you buy stuff from the store? Did you pay a contractor? We need to see that listed in an invoice or on a receipt. and then how you paid it. Was it a check? Was it a credit card, etc.? We need to see some type of documentation that shows that you paid for it. Sometimes this can be on the same document, like a receipt from the Home Depot or something. We'll have all the items listed and the credit card listed. That in that case, you only need the one sheet. But often this will be two pieces: an invoice and a check. Fairly typical. For in-kind documentation, we need to see information about what was donated, and a description of it, and then the value of it. So for materials or labor, typically that comes with a professional invoice, or excuse me, for donated materials, if someone they need to state that they donated to you and state the value. If it's a large amount of value, we might ask for additional documentation or proof. But typically it's like, oh, we had 3 buckets of paint that we donated to the project, and you kind of estimate a market value. The general labor is $37 an hour, as we talked before. That does need to be accompanied by timesheets that list the hours they worked. And then I mentioned before, the professional services need to be an invoice, lists the work that was done, and lists the value that's being donated. So here's a couple of examples. On the left, we have a not helpful invoice. Very little detail. Don't really know what 4 feet is. Don't know what's going on here. On the right, we have a detailed invoice that shows the things that were purchased. Adding to that, the proof of expense. We've got the invoice over here. It's got the detailed information. We see the balance due is $1,100, and we see this $1,100 check from the grantee, and the amount matches. If for any reason the amount on your invoice and the amount on your check is different, like this check went toward multiple things and some of them weren't in the grant project, you need to make a note about that somewhere and let us know why the numbers are different. If they're straight up the same, great, that's easy. We can move forward with that. But if for any reason the numbers are different, make a little note, let us know why. Otherwise, we're going to come back to you and say, hey, why are these different? And make you explain it anyway. And then here's an example of a professional services donation where you've got a description of the work that was donated, calculation of the value, and then donation clearly noted on the invoice. All right, so the packet is a little tricky. You gotta, basically what we ask you to do is take your spreadsheet, put that in chronological order, and then you create a PDF packet, all one packet of line by line. First line, here's the invoice, here's the check. Second line, here's the invoice, here's the check. And we ask you to label them. So you can see item 3, page 1 of 1. These ones, item 2, page 1 of 2, page 2 of 2. So label them in the PDF packet to correlate with a line in the spreadsheet. So that we can easily track, okay, this is the expense they listed. Here's the 2 pages in the packet that correspond with that. And then that labeling. Okay, moving along. We're a little bit over time, but I'm gonna keep rolling. Volunteer report. We have a document that you can download. This is the summary report. So this is not a timesheet, this is the volunteer report. So this should summarize multiple volunteer timesheets. So you list the name, the dates, brief description, the element that it relates to, and the total hours on that timesheet or couple of timesheets. You can do this, you can manage your volunteers and timesheets in any format that you like. It can be monthly, it could be bi-weekly, it could be just, we get some folks who have a sheet, then it's like, just put the date and the what you worked, and it's, over 3 months, there's maybe 10 lines, and that's fine as long as the date is recorded and the description of the work is recorded and it's signed by the volunteer, and then you summarize that timesheet in each line here in this report. Here's some examples of some volunteer timesheets from our friends over at Quilcene. They do it monthly, so each line is the day of the month, and then they list the work, and then the hours worked, the total hours, and then summarize here, volunteer signs. And then that total hours gets listed here. The timesheet hours, it automatically multiplies it by 37 for you. And then at the end, you have your total value of volunteer labor, which is always this top line in the doc list spreadsheet. So if you don't have any volunteer labor, that's fine. This top line will always be blank for you. If you do, that number, that total number from the spreadsheet goes here. For reimbursements, we may ask you to submit additional documentation if we feel like the invoices aren't providing enough information, or if the invoice references a contract that we haven't seen a copy of. We'll ask for a copy of that contract, or if there's any other questions that we have. So just be aware of that. If we see something and it's unclear, we're gonna ask questions. Recommendations for reimbursement processes. If you have past match, meaning any things that you spent starting July 1st to now-ish, or whenever your contract is signed, and you're going to count that as part of your match, let's document that right up front, get that out of the way, make it chronological. And so it's all very clear that our first reimbursement was all this past stuff, and now you're stocked up on match, and then we can calculate things moving forward. Reimbursements should be early and often. We do not want you to wait till the end. We would love to have you submit them as you go. There's no schedule. But if you have, 20 to 30 or so items that you've, like receipts and things that you have gathered, like that's a good time to submit something, because as soon as you're submitting a packet that's hundreds of lines long, which we have dealt with, it slows it way, way down. It's much, much harder for us to review that and to correct that and to have to go back through the whole packet multiple times. So we would prefer smaller, more frequent reimbursements. We will work with you on however your project schedule needs to go, but that is our preference, and that makes the process the most smooth. Expect that you will probably have to make some corrections, especially on your first couple, which does end up slowing down the time frame for receiving the funds. So it goes through 3 layers of review over here. Our fiscal department reviews it, David reviews it, and I review it. And so as it works its way through all of those, if there's an error, it goes back through all of those, and we have to re-review the reports. So that's why fewer items can be a little easier to deal with, because that process can happen a little faster. As I mentioned before, our fiscal office issues payments, pays invoices twice per month, roughly the 10th and the 25th, typically. So if there's some specific payment timing that you need, let us know, but typically it has to be within those dates of the month, the 10th or the 25th, but hopefully it's not too rigid. Okay, let's do monitoring reports real quick, and then we'll open her up for questions. The monitoring reports are after your project is completed, those 13 years. Basically, again, quick snippet. We're not looking for a long, drawn-out report. We just want to have a touch base with you. Have any changes occurred to property control? You got any new leases? You got any new property liens or easements or anything you need to just report to us? Let us know. Are you continuing to fill your project purpose, which is providing public access to history? What kind of programming did you offer this year? It doesn't have to be a detailed list of all the programs, but we continue to provide exhibits and programs and this past year. Give us a few details about your work over the past year. And our favorite, always, photos. If you're able to provide some updated photos about your programming, the property, we would love to see that. So again, this is intended to be like a 5 to 10 minute thing once a year. You send us an update. Still doing good history work. Building's still there. just to check in. So, okay, our final pop quiz of the day. I think it's final. When should I submit reimbursement requests? Early and often, when I complete an element of work, when everything is finished, or just once in June 2027. When should you submit? Lots of correct answers here. Love to see it. Love to see it. Okay. Early and often. Yes. Smaller, more frequent is better. When you complete an element of work, that's often a good time to submit as well, but we hope that that's relatively early and often. And just once on June 30th, that is the wrong answer, unfortunately. Please do not wait till the end to submit your first reimbursement. If you're not submitting reimbursements, we will be pinging you and like, hey, what's going on with your project? Looking at your status reports. Hey, what's going on? We need you to start submitting reimbursements because we do not want to wait till the end. We have a lot going on at the end of the fiscal year. It'll be your 19 grants plus any past grants that have gotten reappropriated. It's a lot going on. So please do not wait till the end. Early and often. Great. Okay. Moving forward, please include your contract number in all emails related to your project to us so we can help track and save, store emails. You may be asking what your contract number is. Here they are. They are your ranking number with the prefix 27. Remember I mentioned we typically refer to the biennium with the final year, the biennium. So 27 dash your ranking number is your contract number. You'll see this in the contract draft that I send you. As I went over before, communicate any future needed project changes quickly and before you implement them. And then reach out with questions. We would much rather have you ask us questions ahead of time rather than just kind of doing something and not really being sure of what you're doing or if you're following the rules. Please just ask. So, okay, I do have one more pop quiz to wrap us up today. What should you be working on right now? Pre-contract questionnaire, updating your contact information in the portal, reading the sample contract document, all of the above. Love to see it. Lots of right answers. Yes, all of the above. 100%. I love it. Everyone gets an A for this last pop quiz. Yes, this is what we should be working on right now, particularly that questionnaire, and then getting ready to sign that contract here in not too long. So, okay. Whew, that was a whirlwind. Lesson learned. Next time, 2 hours, full 2 hours for all the content. Go ahead, stop sharing. We'll open it up for questions. Thanks for sticking around. I know we're a little over time, but we are. I'm happy to hang around and answer any questions you have. If your question is super detailed and specific to your project, we may take that conversation offline. But we'll go ahead and do our best to answer. So, David, looks like David is answering questions about the LEED certification. That's a big old back and forth. How far back in time can we go with past match? Yep, July 1st, 2019. So it's 6 years from the first day of the biennium. So July 1st, 2025 is the first day of the biennium. That's coming up here in 30 or 27 days, 26 days. 6 years back from there, July 1st, 2019. Note that if you provide more match than needed, it does restrict those dollars from being used to match other grants. Not a fun lesson to learn. Yes, that is correct, Holly. So and that applies to this grant too. So if you've got a big project and you got a grant now and you're planning to apply next cycle again for more money, what we're going to do, or we're going to advise you to do, is as soon as you hit that cash or the match threshold, stop reporting. Stop reporting. Only use the expenses for this grant, the minimum amount that you need. And then we button all that up. We close out that contract. And then anything else that you're spending can count for a future grant application match. So we want to keep it contained to the minimum amount because we want to keep the other money that you're spending sort of free and clear and able to be used in the future if you need it. And David reiterated that there's no reason to count extra match. It doesn't do any. It doesn't help you in this. It's not. There's no bonus points. It's nothing extra. There's just a minimum threshold you have to hit, and then we typically tell you to stop. Yeah. So the notating on the PDF. The question of how to do that. David uses Bluebeam. I use Adobe Acrobat. Both of those are paid tools. You can, if you've got hard copies, you can literally write it, like write a note in the upper corner and then scan it. I've been meaning to do some research to try to find a free tool that would allow you to add little notations to a PDF. So stay tuned. We'll work on trying to find something that's a little bit easier access. Yeah, Jeff, if we have no volunteer hours, don't need to bother with it. Don't need to bother with the report, the timesheets, and that first line in your spreadsheet will always be blank, and that's totally fine. That's a majority of projects don't use volunteer hours, but it's important for some, especially smaller ones. So a signature by the volunteer is required. We use a Google form that captures info but doesn't allow for signature by volunteer. From Sonia. Yeah, so basically we require a signature that says, that acknowledges, it basically is acknowledging the donation from the donor, right? Like if you're producing just a spreadsheet of numbers, that's not proof from the donor. So moving forward, as David mentioned in the chat, we need some mechanism by which the volunteer acknowledges the numbers you're reporting for their hours. Again, we don't have a strict format that has to be in. We want to try to make it easy for you. Sonia, if you want to show us like kind of your system and we can kind of game it out with you to create something that's going to work within what you've already got going, we can do that. But we need some kind of acknowledgement from the volunteer that they're acknowledging what you're reporting. Okay, a couple people had to take off. Totally understand. Open Office has a lot of Office Suite options. Thank you, Claire. I'm going to write that down. Okay, that was a lot. That was a lot of information, but hopefully got you primed and ready to start working on contract negotiations with me and scope descriptions and all that good stuff. Anyone want to come off mute, ask questions, raise a hand? Actually, we're not as many. Kelly, like the pop quiz. Thanks. Trying to make it a little interactive, a little more fun. Any other questions, concerns? We're here to help. Like I said a minute ago, we'd rather answer questions up front than rather try to correct things or redirect things afterwards. So let us know. Let us know what questions come up. Thumbs up from Brennan for the pop quizzes too. Cool. All right, we'll keep those. All right. Questions? David, anything I missed? Any last notes? Sorry about my coughing fit. Feeling much better now.
I don't think so. No. We hadn't talked about it. Were we going to have any office hours this time around for questions? Nobody really showed up last time.
I don't think so. one thing I did want to mention that has been a little bit on the back burner, unfortunately, is an updated reimbursement instruction video. So the one that exists, we don't really share out very much because it's the old form. We updated the form. And we just need to sit down, write it all out step by step, script by script, and get, you know, some more detailed samples for you. I'm hoping to do that. I don't want to overcommit myself by the end of the calendar year. So it won't be ready right away. But that is still on the back burner to have something you can just like quick refer to, like to walk you through the reimbursement form. It's a lot to keep track of. It's a lot of notations and detailed stuff. So that is something that we want to work on. Sonia is asking, the guidelines document is still a good and accurate resource. Yes. As I said in my email to y'all, this is a great time to revisit the guidelines. There's a lot up in the upfront for the application stuff, but starting, I think in section, I want to say 6 is kind of the post-award information that refers back, right? Like the application talks about expense eligibility and all this, a lot of stuff we covered today. But that guidelines document are the standards that you're going to be held to throughout the course of your contract and the project. So that's a great point, Sonia. Good to revisit. And for the most part, a lot of questions that we get are in the guidelines. We're happy to answer them. But if you want to do a little word search in there, often you can find lots of good info there. So cool. Okay. Well, thanks for hanging with us and this very dense information. So next steps, as those pre-contract questionnaires get submitted in the portal. And by the way, the portal, like the application, you can save, but then you also have to then submit. So make sure you're hitting that submit button, not just saving, so that we know it's ready to go. We'll be taking a look at that urgency question and basically just putting a priority list together of who said their contract is the most urgent. We'll start with them, work our way through it. So that's the next step is just submitting that info to us so we can get those contracts started. And you can get your work started. So, okay. Well, thanks everybody. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week and weekend. Reach out with questions and we'll be in touch as we sort through those questionnaires and let you know if we have need anything else or further clarifications as we work on those contracts. So, all right. Bye, everybody.